Hi, and welcome to GWAMED's annual Spring Empowerment Conference. This event is called Trailblazing at Any Age, and we have featured here two absolutely incredible undergraduate women who are here to share their experiences with us. So I would like to introduce Xandra Mentor. She is a fourth-year undergraduate student at Tufts University who is double majoring in religion and Middle Eastern studies. As a queer Muslim convert and sexual assault survivor, Xandra has worked both within the Muslim community and on a macro level to discuss topics of gender and sexuality that are often taboo in Muslim cultures. She currently works as a staff writer and regional initiatives leader for Coming of Faith, a company that works to give back narratives to marginalized women. Throughout her undergraduate career, Xandra has written for Huffington Post and has been featured on PRI's The World, been a panelist for discussing queerness and religion at several universities, and has been active in her community. I would also at this time like to introduce Saheela Ibraheem, who is currently a senior at Harvard University. She first matriculated at the age of 15. She is also a Nigerian-American Muslim woman who is currently concentrating in neurobiology with a minor in computer science. She enjoys talking about issues of race, religion, and gender. Saheela also loves teaching and mentoring, learning languages, and doing logic puzzles. And now I would like to give the microphone over to these two amazing women and hear about their experiences.
Hello, my name is Saheela Ibraheem, and as she mentioned, I am a Nigerian American. I'm Muslim, and I'm also a woman. So growing up, it's been a pretty interesting experience being in the United States. So actually, a lot of my life as a child, I didn't really notice the differences between myself and most of my classmates. It was actually really interesting. My first introduction to sort of learning was mostly at home. So my mom is an accountant and my dad is a quantitative analyst. So they both really love working with numbers. And so of course I myself also like mathematics. So at home we would do math, myself and my three younger brothers. And I was, so they're younger, but I still like to brag that I am, let's say, smarter than them. So I didn't really know that that for example, women were marginalized in this country and not given necessarily the same opportunities as men were. So yeah, definitely getting that experience growing up, going to middle and then high school. I was definitely always ahead in math, and also I guess I skipped a couple of grades, so in other subjects as well. But I remember first getting to Harvard, taking a math class that sort of had a reputation for being the one where all the really smart math people took, that had people who took the who did the International Mathematics Olympiads and all those really cool math competitions, and myself never having done any of those. Sort of getting my first introduction to what it's like to be different from other. I mean, obviously, people at Harvard are not the typical maybe students, but for example, being the only African American in my class, one of three women, one who was my roommate, so that definitely helped a lot. So yeah, so being in this math class, I know in the beginning, and throughout the class was definitely really challenging, but I remember in the beginning really thinking that, oh, this really isn't for me. I should take a class that is more at my own level, and talking to my parents about this, and them saying no, Saheela, we know that you can do this. You love challenging yourself, and this will be a great experience for you. So I went to the professor of the class once, actually, and talked to him about my reservations. And he said to me that the way that I was learning math in this class, as someone who hadn't been exposed to these big competitions, was actually the right way to learn math, because I didn't have these I mean, I hadn't done these myself, but apparently being in the Math Olympiad, the point is to solve these problems really quickly, and so a lot of it doesn't really allow you to explore the problem, to think about it for long amounts of time, go back to your room, think about it in the shower, and then come back and write a beautiful proof that solves this problem, and which is what I had always growing up thought what math was. So I thought that was a really interesting point, and so I stuck through with the class, and definitely was still a challenge, but it was definitely one of the greatest things I could have done, and I am really glad that I was able to have that opportunity, and to have a professor who was willing to say, despite the challenges that you have, you should stick through with it. Yeah, so sort of having that defining experience is what sort of allowed me to become interested in issues of education, of race and gender. And so I actually, so at Harvard we have different pre-orientation programs for freshmen when they first get in, to spend a week getting to know other people, getting to know the campus, or as I did, getting to know the woods, because I'd never been hiking before, and I did the hiking pre-orientation program. But I decided that I want to be a leader of one of the pre-orientation programs that does stay at Harvard. It's called the First Year Urban Program. And what the program aims to do is we introduce first years not just to Harvard and Cambridge and Boston, but to issues of social justice, activism, and advocacy in these areas. And so there we talked a lot about race, class, religion, gender, sexuality, just so many different issues that I had not been exposed to throughout my life, and being able to talk with people of diverse backgrounds, and especially these incoming freshmen, and learn from them, as well as teach them about what it is to be a Harvard student, and how we as Harvard students can interact with different communities around us and be responsible citizens of Cambridge and Boston through our years there. Definitely allowed me to grow as a student, as a person, and also to develop leadership skills, which I definitely use throughout the teaching and mentoring programs that I'm a part of. So one of the programs that I really am fortunate to be a part of is called Science Club for Girls. And what Science Club for Girls does is it introduces elementary school girls to different topics in STEM fields. So for example, this semester I'm doing a curriculum on oceans. So we talk about our oceans, different issues that affect them, the ecosystem, we also dissect perch fish and clams. And so through this we talk about science, and so I think science in general, even though we sort of as a country see it as this field that we can gain so much from, we definitely don't necessarily expose girls to it as much as we might boys. And so being a part of such a program and allowing these little girls to experience the sort of experience that I did growing up with my parents has definitely been one of the most wonderful parts of my time here as well. Yeah, so that has been my experience with different issues related to science and gender and race, and I'm still definitely learning, but I hope that after graduating I'll be able to use the things that I've learned to hopefully impact other people's lives.
Two microphones.
Is this, I don't know if this is working now. Is it? Oh, okay. So this is fine. Okay. Hi. So my name is Xandra. I am a senior, fourth year. I like to use, because it makes me sound a little bit cooler, I think, at Tufts. I have a list of adjectives that I would use to describe myself, but I think that by listing off these random things about myself is less productive than saying that I have to operate as one human being. So all those things do come together in one person. So I can talk a little bit about that experience as a student, as being queer, as being Muslim, and being all three of those things, plus an activist on different levels. I think that that's something really important when people speak to, is when people ask questions about these different things. I'm coming from a very specific background just as Saheela would be coming from a very specific background in regards to like asking questions. So that's something I think that we often forget about. So to give a little bit of background on me, I am a Muslim convert. I converted after my mother did. She converted maybe 2 years after 9/11. So in rural Wisconsin, having that was a little bit different than how I converted about 10 years after her. And so I followed in her footsteps doing that my first year of college, which most people would assume is a very strange thing to take alcohol and all these fun things out of your life to become very religious. And seeing that, if you have any questions about that process, I can definitely let you know. But I am from a very small town in Wisconsin, and having a Muslim mom there was a very different experience, being called an Arabian girl for some reason, even though I'm pretty obviously white. And having that type of bigotry being very integrated into my life, I think very much affected me, especially when I first converted. I was very defensive about my religion, very unwilling to discuss topics that there are problems that happen within our community, as much as those things are often used to pigeonhole discussions that happen within the community and are used against Muslims as a whole by media and other outlets. I think that it's something that's very much needs to be discussed. So those things were definitely something that I used to be very defensive about, and I'm now very much more willing to talk about them, but we also need to talk about that there are problems in other communities as well happening at the same time that need to be addressed. When I converted, I very much closeted myself in Tufts. If you ever go there, if you're aware of it, it's a very LGBTQ friendly community. So when I first got there, I was like, yes, I can now be out and be perfectly fine here, being queer and having that. And then I converted and I was like, I don't think I can do this at the same time. I don't think that that's allowed. And then I stumbled upon somebody's Tumblr from Boston, and she actually was queer and Muslim and had talked about this experience. I was like, oh my goodness, there's people like me. I can actually be these things together. And very much have, over the past year and a half, have come to recognize that that's something that I can do at the same time. Whether or not that's going to be accepted by either the queer community or the Muslim community is a whole other concept. I was able and very lucky to find the group called Queer Muslims of Boston and have very much felt at home, and the most at home in that community, simply because they're people dealing with very similar problems as me. Whether it be Muslims who converted or Muslims who have been Muslim their entire lives, people coming from being very religious backgrounds to very much more like secularized, like culturally Muslim, and having those types of experiences as well. And I think something that I try to work to do is kind of break down these discussions that queerness doesn't exist within Islam. You see a lot of times very progressive Muslims in the United States who are very like pro-LGBTQ rights, as long as they're not Muslim, as long as they aren't coming into our places of worship. You know, so it's very much, we're okay with this as long as you aren't part of us. So there's something about that that's very challenging. And there are definitely other Muslims that have worked to do this before me. There are books written about it. And there are Muslims in the Middle East who are struggling to gain these types of rights as well, but that's a very different story than what's happening in the US too. So I have worked with Coming of Faith, as Kelly mentioned, which is changing its name actually and changing its mission from just Muslim women to women of color and queer women and other marginalized identities that are on the feminine spectrum, and trying to empower them through storytelling and through telling your own narrative. I think that personally is something that's really powerful for me, because having several different things that I can very easily list off in a tweet about myself or 160 characters is very easy, but talking about those things and living living a life of having these different types of backgrounds is a very different story. And I think that's where the discussion of intersectionality comes in, where, you know, the Muslim community erases, you know, several different identities just by being a community as a whole. And, you know, discussions of feminism also erase women of color, trans women, queer women, all sorts, you know, all different backgrounds all the time. And that is like a mainstream concept that needs to be kind of broken apart in order to talk about how we can kind of fix that narrative in order to include more women in that. So I think that that's a good introduction for myself, but I think that that's what I'll leave it at. If you guys have questions, that would be great too.
I have a question for Saheela. Actually, Saheela, wait, was it 25 or 55?
Oh, 55.
You're amazing. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Math 55 is this class that I've heard absolutely amazing horror stories from. So what was that experience like? You said you were one of only 2 women in that class.
Yeah, so there were 3 women.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, so it was, again, like one of them was my roommates, which I don't know how Harvard came to do that, but it was definitely great because we could work on PSETs together. We were talking about math and like Annenberg on napkins. Yeah, so it's definitely nice to have people that like I could talk to and relate to. On the African American issue though, I mean, I know like that there are like obviously like black people taking like 25 and other math classes as well, and who like actually go on to concentrate in math, which I didn't. So, but yeah, definitely, and I can also speak more to computer science, which is my minor. So definitely seeing that. So I guess like yeah, I haven't talked as much about like the Muslim aspect. I do feel like I do see like I guess in 55 there were other Muslims in 55. But so like I do see other Muslims in like computer science, but not like other black people as much. Or I mean there are other women. I mean like compared to like men or people of other races. So I would say that there are definitely initiatives that are trying to make it better, especially in math. There's actually a math like major named Mina, who is right now. Well, she did a study actually of like how people in the math department like related to gender feel about like experiences within math, and definitely it shows that women feel that they aren't so much a part of the community or aren't able to go to events as much or don't have as many people that they can relate to who are women who are like professors. So yeah, I think definitely people like that are trying to make it better, thinking about starting like a group for gender inclusivity in the math department. And in computer science, we have a women in computer science group, which actually is amazing because, so we have a conference, We Code, Women Engineers Code, well, we just started last year. But so there are definitely these initiatives that are trying to highlight these sort of disparities in the computer science math departments, but are also trying to show that we can get together people of different genders and like show that we are trying to make it better, make it a more inclusive space for people of different backgrounds.
Anybody else have any other questions? So, Xandra, at the beginning, you were talking a little bit about identity and how you have the same things that you can sum up in a Twitter tweet. Could you maybe expand a little bit on how identity can be constructed from those things, or how strongly each of those affects what you do in your daily life?
Yeah, I think a lot of those things intersect all the time, and because of that, because I feel different ways in different spaces, I kind of switch on and switch off different things, like very much like code switching of like who I feel like I am in those types of spaces. I definitely feel like if I started talking about like queerness in, you know, like after Friday prayers, it would be a little bit strange. Or bringing up like something along those lines. I feel like if I brought up things about religion, which I have in like queer spaces, those are a little bit different depending on like how religious people are too. Because as much as somebody could possibly relate, it's also something that could be very difficult to talk about based on, you know, conversion therapy still being a thing, like for queer youth that are usually in a Christian context, but that is still a legal thing to do with your children, which is not great, but also the fact that it can be very traumatic to have a religious background too. And I think that's where, especially like with queer Muslims, it turns into very much there's a Muslim part of you that you can't, if you're born Muslim and have a Muslim family, that must be, many people that I know have said, you know, it's a part of me that I can't like take away, and it's a part of me that I don't want to take away either. But it's also like you choose, you know, most people choose either being queer or being Muslim, and that's like where the space is trying to construct overlapping and intersectionality where people can actually exist as like, you know, more to 100% rather than not. I think also along lines of talking about sexual violence within the Muslim community is also something that is erased because of the fact that, especially in the United States, Muslims are more like very often do not want to talk about the issues that happen like within the Muslim community. There was last year a initiative for, I think it was a Kickstarter campaign for a documentary that's already been made on sexual violence within the Muslim community called Breaking Silence. And when our MSA was approached on wanting to put out things about it, they did not want to talk about it because it would make Muslims look bad. Like, these are things that are conscious, things that happen a lot for Muslims in the US is, will this make me look bad? How will I portray myself to others? Now, that doesn't necessarily happen for all Muslims, and it might not be as much of a conscious effort, but from speaking to a lot of people and being Muslim myself, like there's something about not wanting to talk about how these things affect within that community, because Muslims already have to fight for just being Muslim and seeing that as a struggle, just being Muslim, rather than even having to add other issues into that as well. So I think it's definitely a lot about finding communities that you feel more 100% with. But I also think you can kind of break these boundaries by talking about the topics when you feel safe and comfortable to. I think topics of race and sexuality and gender are really ignored within like even a Western Muslim context too. And if we continue to bring these up in our personal lives, it's helping to change this discussion. The Islamic Society of North America released a statement condemning the actions that are happening in Baltimore right now, and there are a large amount of Muslims that are very upset about this. If you go on their Facebook page and you see the public service announcement, there's a lot of Muslims who are writing up now a response to that and started a hashtag campaign. We are not my Muslim leaders, or I am not my Muslim leaders, because of the fact that it's erasing Black Muslims a lot. And I'm sure Saheela could probably speak to that more, as I don't have that personal connection to that. But the fact that we're having large organizations coming out and condemning people, and not recognizing that the fact that in 17 months 255 Black people have been killed by police brutality, and that some of those were Muslim. And when people, especially in the Muslim community, are willing to back Syrian rebels at a certain point, and some people have and some people haven't, or being able to back Palestinians in their fight in their struggle against Israel, and allowing that type of violence, and saying that that's okay. I'm not saying that people should preach for violence, but I don't think you need to condone it in order to understand it. I think you can understand that people, feel angry about something, and you don't need to sit here and write PSAs about them. And I think that that's something that's really interesting, that now we're having Muslims that are coming out and saying, working against these organizations that are supposed to be speaking for us, and they're not. And they're not speaking for all Muslims. They're speaking for very specific Muslims who are willing to sign on to that. And I'm really glad that there are Muslims who are willing to say, hey, what if that were, 255 Muslims being killed in, 17 months? 255 like hijabis, if you want to put it, for like women who wear hijab, to make it like more visibly Muslim, because there were Muslims that were being killed too in that. And there isn't a sort of like struggle for that type of talk about that. So yeah, I think that's, hopefully that answers your question. Very long-winded and kind of tangential, but yeah. I mean, I think because I wear my Muslimness on my head, that isn't erasable from queer communities specifically. I would say that I feel more comfortable in queer communities, knowing that I'm queer and that people might have misconceptions about Muslims, but the likelihood that they do, I feel like, is less, just because of my own personal experience. It's not to say that there aren't problems within the queer community itself too, but I feel like my Muslimness is more integrated to my day-to-day life, because I pray, I go to Friday prayers, I do these different types of things that are like 100% all the time. Not to say that being queer isn't 100% all the time too, but it's not something I actively am thinking about all of the time, whereas like my religion, I feel like, is very much more something that I think about on a day-to-day basis, and very integrated, and especially because it is something that I visibly portray too. In regards to larger organizations and communities, I think I can like turn off my queerness for being in a community, because I feel like at the end of the day, even if 100% of those people won't accept me, there's some people who do, and I'm able to find solace in the fact that there are people who do. And also just because I know if I coming in and asking everybody to automatically be okay with something that I don't feel like everybody can, it would be harder. And I think it's easier to disassociate me being queer and Muslim and being able to address issues on the spot when you hear like homophobic comments made within a Muslim community. I'm very much more able to be like, hey, what if there was a queer Muslim and that was a thing, and like talk about that, and talk about this on a religious basis, talk about different scholars throughout history like Ibn Hazm, who have like come out and said like they've been used and to like allow for a queer Islam. And Scott Kugel and other, Amina Wadud, all sorts of people who have been allowed for this type of discussion, and be like, these people exist. How do you feel about that? And try to disassociate. And that can be kind of dangerous too, I think, because you're not allowing yourself to be 100% yourself. And I really hope that one day I could just be, queer and Muslim. And I mean, I don't think people would know that I was queer automatically. The fact that I need to like tell tell people that. I think is that heteronormativity is something that's really common in all like communities. So I think that notion of I need to tell people it, or that it's an assumption that I'm straight, is also a problem that needs to be addressed. Getting back to your question, yeah, I think people deal with it of turning parts of themselves off, and it's really hard. And it's something that I deal with. I think other people deal with it too. I think for parts of you that you can't turn off, you kind of deal with some of the people who say like things that are hurtful, or you keep those people out of your life, or you keep those like if you're going to community events and you know that you're going to be there, you don't engage with them. It's a lot. Saheela and I were talking about this earlier, where it's like it's very easy for you to surround yourself by people who agree with you, and it's a lot nicer space. So, but at the same time, you do engage with people who don't always agree with you, and you have to like find ways to handle that. But yeah, sorry for the very long-winded response. It kind of went off in all sorts of directions, but hopefully that helped better your question. If you have something that's more direct, that's a follow-up, I can answer that too. But.
So in the interest of time, I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to see, so first off, I wanted to make sure that anything that you guys wanted to say got caught on tape. The second thing is that since we started a little bit late, we're going a little bit late into the reception, so I just wanted to see if everybody was good with answering questions for a little bit more, or if you'd like to wrap up now and then we can all talk in a group over nice Whole Foods heater. So how are people in their room feeling?
Yeah, first of all, I really love how when you talk about math or also your teaching, it's in you smiling. I really like that. It really comes across that you love what you do. So I think that's amazing. And so I grew up in a small town in Germany where I grew up in a small town in Germany where everyone is German and obviously white. And when I was a kid, I always wanted to be German. I always wanted to have a German name, and it was really hard for me. And I think I really started to embrace what I am fully in my early 20s. So you talked about how you really felt you were different when you entered Harvard. So I'm just curious, how challenging it was for you. Well, you talked a little about it, that you thought, well, maybe this is not for you, but how much was being different on top of this really hard math a factor, or would you rather, because you seem so positive, maybe you'd rather say, okay, I will take this challenge, and could you just comment on that?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because I feel like I am sort of simultaneously yeah, I love myself, but I also have those moments where I'm yeah, I wish I had I mean, my name is Arabic, but I guess a white sounding name, or sometimes I wish my hair were not really hard to deal with, because it's I mean, I guess you can't see it, but it's hard to deal with. But yeah, I guess in terms of how it affects me in class, it's just sometimes it's distracting, where I'm not really thinking about it, and I'm wow, this one person isn't here, so now I'm the only black person in the room, and then I'm just focusing on that instead of focusing on this proof that we're learning about, or but yeah, I guess overall I do I'm glad that I'm different. I think it's really cool that I know so my parents speak Yoruba, that I know how to greet people in Yoruba, or that yeah, that I can read the Quran even if I don't understand everything. Or I mean, I definitely do appreciate these are what Xandra was saying. These are parts of my identity, but I wouldn't be myself without them. All of them are really important and integral to who I am.
Did you ever come across ordinary people running to you and assume that you are majoring in arts?
Uh,
And how do you respond to that?
it's really funny because I feel like I'm really like bad about this, but yeah, I am stuck in the Harvard bubble a lot, and so usually I actually get like people assuming that because they know about like this math class or like the types of like this semester I'm taking mostly computer science classes. I actually get like people assuming that I'm computer science or math, so it's sort of like the opposite. But maybe if I like were in a different context, I don't know.
I think something's going on with this, and I want to leave it right here and not point it back at me.
Is this one working?
Yeah, this one's on, I think.
Okay. Yeah, we can also take this one. It's not making bad noises. Or maybe it is.
How about this one? Okay.
Let's just try to turn these off, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that would be a good idea. Okay, awesome. I think also just along the lines of what you were saying, because I think the fact that I'm Muslim and studying religion is automatically an assumption that like has no problems with it. I think I'm the only Muslim currently studying religion at Tufts, and being in a context where it's very Judeo-Christian is also a very like challenging, different thing. So I just like really understood that when you were talking about that, because I don't know, most Muslims at Tufts are studying science or biology or usually the pre-med track or engineering. So I think it's just like an assumption that all, like if you're Muslim and at Tufts, you're studying something that's in STEM, and it's, yeah, or IR, and those are it for the most part. But we also have 25% of our undergraduates studying IR or econ, so yeah, like felt that. Oh, international relations, sorry. Yeah. I was studying international relations, and then I dropped because it's very dominated by people who want to like utilize the Middle East to talk to the Department of Defense, and like, oh, you speak Arabic, now you can like rat on the Muslims in the Middle East. Basically, it's a very, yeah, if you Google like jobs for it, it's very interesting. I mean, that's not to say that all IR is like that. But I felt at Tufts that I was more interested in like the cultural and historical dynamics and like how that could be used to better international relations, and that just turned out better for Middle Eastern studies. So, and religion, very different context though. Does anyone else have any questions? Or is it we should do food?
Yeah.
All right. I'm also hungry. So last question, is there anything else that you guys would like to say? Is there anything that you wish that people knew about you or anything like that? Put you on the spot. Okay, if not, then food.